Before we dive into today's weight classes, let's talk about when UFC had absolutely no weight divisions at all. Yeah, you heard that right. Back in 1993, UFC 1 was basically a free-for-all where a 170-pound karate guy could face off against a 400-pound sumo wrestler in the same cage. The whole idea was simple. Find out which fighting style was truly the most effective, regardless of size. Take the very first UFC fight ever. Gerard Gordeau, a Dutch kickboxer weighing 216 pounds, stepped into the octagon against Taylor Tooley, a massive sumo wrestler tipping the scales at over 410 pounds. What happened next was brutal. Gordeau landed one clean head kick and Tooley was done, teeth flying everywhere. That's it, fight over. And here's the crazy part. There were basically no rules back then. No weight classes, no time limits, no rounds, no gloves required, and definitely no mouth guards. You could literally fight until someone tapped out, got knocked out, or worse. But obviously this couldn't last forever. After seeing smaller fighters consistently outclass bigger opponents through superior technique, and with safety becoming a real concern, the UFC realized they needed structure. So in 1997, they introduced their first two weight divisions, heavyweight for fighters over 200 pounds and lightweight for everyone under 200 pounds. That no weight class era proved something important though. Technique beats size when skill levels are equal, but it also showed us why weight classes exist in the first place, to create fair, competitive fights where the best fighter wins, not just the biggest one. Now let's jump to the lightest division in the UFC, strawweight at 115 pounds. This is exclusively a women's division, and don't let the low weight fool you. These fights are absolutely vicious. We're talking lightning fast combinations, non-stop pressure, and cardio that just doesn't quit. The current champion is Zhang Weili, who made history as the first Chinese UFC champion. This woman is a straight-up killer. She throws heat with every strike and has that relentless forward pressure that breaks opponents mentally. Her title reign has been nothing short of dominant with 3 successful defenses. What makes strawweight so entertaining is that knockout power isn't the main weapon here. Instead, you get these high-volume striking battles where fighters throw hundreds of strikes per fight. It's all about angles, movement, and who can maintain that pace for 25 minutes straight. The level of competition is insane too. Every fight feels like it could be a title eliminator because the skill gap between the top contenders is so small. Moving up to flyweight at 125 pounds. This is where things get interesting because it's the first division that features both men and women. The current men's champion is Alexandre Pantoja, a scrappy Brazilian who's basically impossible to put away. This guy fights like his life depends on it every single time. But let's be real here. Most people can't name half the fighters in men's flyweight, and there's a reason for that. The division lost its biggest star when the UFC basically threw away Demetrius Johnson, aka Mighty Mouse. This dude was arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time, holding the belt for nearly 6 years with 11 consecutive title defenses. That's a record that might never be broken. Here's what's crazy though. DJ was so dominant and technically perfect, but he wasn't a trash talker, so Dana White literally traded him to one championship for Ben Askren. Yeah, you heard that right. They gave up the flyweight GOAT for a guy who got knocked out in 5 seconds by Jorge Masvidal. That's some brilliant business right there. Next up is men's bantamweight at 135 pounds, and this division is absolutely chaotic. We're talking about the most dramatic weight class in the entire UFC. The current champion is Merab Dvalishvili, and this guy is basically a cardio machine that never stops moving. He broke Sean O'Malley's reign with his relentless pressure and takedowns that just keep coming. But let's talk about the legends who made this division what it is. Dominic Cruz revolutionized bantamweight with his footwork that looked like he was dancing around opponents. The guy was nearly impossible to hit cleanly because he'd be throwing strikes from angles that shouldn't even exist. Injuries derailed his prime, but when he was on, nobody could figure him out. Then there's TJ Dillashaw, a 2-time champion whose legacy got completely destroyed by a doping scandal. This dude was throwing combinations that looked like video game combos, but apparently he needed some extra help to do it. And who could forget Aljamain Sterling winning the belt in the most controversial way possible? Peter Yan landed an illegal knee and got disqualified. Sterling became champion while lying on the canvas. That's peak bantamweight chaos right there. What makes this division insane is the pace. These guys have the cardio to throw hundreds of strikes while wrestling for 25 minutes straight. It's non-stop scrambles, submission attempts, and exchanges that would gas out bigger fighters in 2 rounds. Featherweight at 145 pounds is where legends are made, and honestly, this division has produced some of the most iconic moments in UFC history. Alexander Volkanovski currently holds the belt after reclaiming it, and this guy is a technical masterpiece. His footwork, timing, and fight IQ are off the charts. But let's talk about the moment that changed everything. Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor in 2015. Aldo had been the king of featherweight for nearly a decade, defending his belt like it was his life's work. Then McGregor shows up talking all this trash, and everyone's thinking Aldo's going to teach this loudmouth a lesson. 13 seconds. That's all it took. One perfectly timed left hand and Aldo was face down on the canvas. The fastest title fight knockout in UFC history. And just like that, McGregor became a superstar and the featherweight division became the most talked about weight class in the sport. That knockout was the seed of McGregor's arrogance. But you can't deny it was one of the most shocking moments in combat sports. Aldo had been untouchable for years, and McGregor erased all of that dominance in less time than it takes to microwave a burrito. Now we've got young killers like Ilia Topuria making waves, showing that featherweight is still producing knockout artists who can end fights with one clean shot. The division perfectly balances speed, power, and technique. You need all three to survive here. Lightweight at 155 pounds is straight up the division that made UFC what it is today. Ilia Topuria currently holds the belt after moving up and knocking out Charles Oliveira, proving he's not just a featherweight bully. But let's be honest, this division will forever belong to one man, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib retired undefeated at 29-0 and dominated everyone he faced, especially Conor McGregor. What made Khabib legendary wasn't just his wrestling, it was how he broke people's will. He'd get you down, make you carry his weight, and slowly drain your soul until you tapped out or got mauled for 5 rounds straight. The biggest event in UFC history was Khabib choking out McGregor and then jumping into the crowd to fight his entire team. That post-fight brawl was so crazy that even Mike Tyson tweeted it was wilder than his ear-biting incident. That's when you know things got out of hand. Now we've got Islam Makhachev carrying on Khabib's legacy, and honestly, this guy might be even more complete than his mentor. His wrestling is suffocating, but his striking has improved so much that he's knocking people out too. The depth in lightweight is absolutely insane. Welterweight at 170 pounds is the UFC's superstar division, and Jack Della Maddalena currently holds the crown after defeating Bilal Muhammad. But this weight class has always been about producing legends and iconic moments that people talk about for years. Let's start with the most embarrassing moment in welterweight history: Ben Askren getting absolutely destroyed by Jorge Masvidal in 5 seconds. Remember, this is the guy UFC traded Mighty Mouse for. And we can't forget Khamzat Chimaev, the undefeated wolf who came through welterweight, destroying everyone before moving up to middleweight. This guy was ragdolling elite fighters like they were amateurs. But middleweight has always been home to some of the most dominant champions in UFC history. Anderson Silva held this belt for almost 7 years. That's the longest title reign in UFC history. The Spider was basically untouchable, dodging strikes like he was in the Matrix and then countering with shots that would put people to sleep instantly. Then came Israel Adesanya, the anime-obsessed striker who became king of the division until he ran into his old kickboxing nemesis Alex Pereira. Poatan knocked out Izzy and took his belt, but Adesanya got his revenge in the rematch with an equally brutal knockout. That rivalry was pure theater, 2 elite strikers who genuinely couldn't stand each other. What makes middleweight special is the perfect balance of speed and power. These guys are big enough to end fights with one shot, but still fast enough to put together beautiful combinations. You get knockout artists, submission specialists, and grinding wrestlers all mixed together in one division. And let's give an honorable mention to Yoel Romero, who was basically a superhuman athlete. This dude could eat head kicks that would hospitalize normal people and just keep moving forward like nothing happened. It was like his soul would leave his body for a second and then come right back. Light heavyweight at 205 pounds is traditionally known as the Glory Division, and Magomed Ankalaev currently holds the throne after dethroning Alex Pereira in a unanimous decision. John Jones. Jones became the youngest UFC champion ever at 23 years old when he entered this division, and honestly, he might be the most talented fighter we've ever seen. Then there's Jiří Procházka, the wild Czech striker who became champion but had to vacate due to injury. This guy fought like he was possessed, throwing spinning elbows and unpredictable strikes that shouldn't work but somehow always did. The most legendary rivalry in light heavyweight history was John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. These two genuinely hated each other, and DC was one of the few fighters who could match Jones's wrestling. He was a double champion, and even Khabib said he couldn't submit him. Light heavyweight perfectly balances knockout power with athletic ability. These guys are big enough to end fights with one shot, but still athletic enough to scramble and move like smaller fighters. Finally, we reach heavyweight at 265 pounds. The big boys division where one punch can literally end your consciousness. Tom Aspinall currently holds the belt after John Jones retired, and honestly, this guy might be the most complete heavyweight we've seen in years. He's got knockout power, slick submissions, and moves way too fast for someone his size. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, John Jones. Many consider him the greatest fighter of all time, but his heavyweight run was complicated. The dude had massive gaps between fights, and his list of controversies reads like a police report. Eye pokes, drug issues, and that infamous 3 a.m. Instagram live where he said he wanted to kill someone. Yeah, this goat came with serious baggage. Then there's Francis Ngannou, who literally has the hardest recorded punch in human history. Getting hit by this man was basically a guaranteed trip to the Shadow Realm. The pace is obviously slower than lighter divisions, but when these giants connect, fights end instantly. There's something primal about watching the biggest, strongest humans on the planet try to knock each other unconscious.